Peter's first one, we need to all away from
The airports are a mess Thursday. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was like 350 or
I think
I was plugging in my Uber, and it said home in it, and I said, yeah, well, and I punched just out of curiosity. It was like $350, and I thought, it'd be great if you get like a nice big car, but
I think it was 350, and then he told me that he gave the person a $100 tip.
Funny farm.
Because they just picked him up in front of the Capitol, like, oh, I'm going to be going to the governor's club.
We had
And then he,
Brad and Janet
wait, Seminole, Florida?
last week, and all the officers went to, whether Republican or Democrat, and their budgets are on arrival.
So when she does, just.
But that said, you still have to be
Janet.
Okay.
I'll let them know that.
on notice
Oh, I haven't
and keep
heard
an eye
of
out,
that.
because
In my.
as much as you say it's dead on arrival,
Oh,
certain
right.
elements may not be dead on arrival, we just don't know which
Okay.
ones.
Yeah.
it is, so.
we're gonna be done by 2 anyway, right?
Yeah.
What's everybody's talking
But we do, yeah.
Yeah.
With,
about stuff that's not going to happen? I guess that's a process.
Good afternoon. Could the folks on the phone say who's on the phone?
Ron Pierce is on the phone.
Okay. Hey,
Hi,
Ron.
Ron.
Natalie is on the phone.
I thought I
Hey,
heard you,
Natalie.
Natalie. Hello. Is that it?
That's so.
I think Steve Palmer's going to dial in here in a second.
Okay.
And Samantha Fenger may call in. She's so to allow her to vote, you have to allow her to vote. You have to take a motion to allow her to vote by phone, but
Can
she's
we
not
do
on.
that?
What?
Can we do that?
Yeah, as
You
long as
can do
there's a
that.
quorum present.
Yes.
Shannon Hanna with VSA is on the phone.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay.
Hi.
But she's not on the phone yet.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, let's start, if we will, please, the legislative committee meeting here at PSTA. And for the record, can we just start with you, Lisa, and we'll identify who's here.
Hi, I am Councilwoman Lisa Wheeler-Bowman from the city of St. Petersburg.
Charlie Justice, Pinellas County Commission.
Janet Long, Pinellas County Commission.
A observer, Bill Johnson, from Clearwater.
Harry Glenn with Van Scoik Associates.
Harry and Brad is here. Okay, so without further ado, shall we vote on the minutes from our last meeting? Everyone? Do you have them?
So moved.
Move approval.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. And federal issues. Harry, do you want to give us an overview of
Sure.
where we are?
Yeah.
Sure. I think the last legislative committee meeting, I believe, was March 1st, so you've had a busy six weeks or so since that last meeting. We've had, in the middle of March, Commissioner Barkley was in Washington for the APTA conference with Brad and Cassandra and Chris, and despite the snowstorm, we had a good couple of days of meetings up there. Brad was a featured guest at a breakfast with APTA the first morning we were there to talk about some of your on-demand services, and other transportation authorities around the country were really interested to learn more about what you all are doing here with those services. We also had a really good meeting with the policy director from Uber to talk about information sharing, that you all are required to provide some data to the state on some of your services, and we're trying to work with the federal government to make sure that you get full credit for the on-demand services that you as an agency are providing to your riders. And so I really had a good meeting with Andrew Salzberg about those issues and gave us some good ideas to take to the Federal Transit Administration. We did meet while we were up there with the Federal Transit Administration with Maggie Schilling, who's in charge of a program called the National Transit Database. The NTD is the organization in the federal government that tracks all of your ridership information, all your ridership data, and they're also the folks that help determine what your annual federal formula payment is. And one of your legislative goals for the year, or your agenda items, is to try and find a way to get compensation or to get credit for those rides that you're providing in those on-demand services. You're the first agency in the country, I think, that's really asking the federal government to provide credit for those rides. And so we had a really good meeting. Brad was there, Commissioner Barkley was there, and Cassandra to talk about these issues with the Federal Transit Administration. It's going to require, I think, some work and some time. As she admitted in the meeting, the technology is actually moving faster than the rules and regulations that can keep up with it. And so she really appreciated the meeting. I thought it was a good meeting to raise the issue with her. I think she gave us some direction going forward. The biggest piece of direction was she probably needs congressional help to make this, to provide this change in the rules that FTA uses to count your ridership numbers and your ridership miles. So we actually had a meeting during that week when Brad and Cassandra were there with the committee staff, House Transportation Committee staff, to talk about this issue. They were very interested in the issue. First time they've actually heard it. So we talked about that, and maybe there would be some opportunities legislatively to rolling down the pike to do that. And then when Commissioner Long and Commissioner Gerard and Brad were up last week, you had a subsequent meeting with the Senate committee staff on that very issue. Again, I think they were hearing this information for the first time. I think they asked some good questions about the issue, and in fact, they talked about having a roundtable discussion and maybe inviting Brad to join a roundtable with the Senate committee staff and members to talk about some of these evolving issues. So I thought, both those trips up were good to raise that issue, which is on your agenda. So we'll continue to work on that. While we were there, the first set of meetings in March, we also had a really good meeting with the FTA on the BRT project. Cassandra gave a really outstanding update to the FTA staff, answered a lot of questions about where you are in the process. We talked about, answered their questions about where you are in the permitting, the engineering. They were glad to hear you finally decided, you got the final route laid out. Talked about next steps forward, and your goal continues to be to get that BRT package into the FTA in August so that it'll be eligible for funding in fiscal year 19. So I think FTA provides some good direction. They're going to continue to stay in touch with them, so that was a good meeting. We also had some meetings while you were in town. The first group was in town in March with a group called the Congressional Sharing Caucus. There's actually a caucus of members of Congress that are looking at on-demand services, Airbnbs, all these kind of innovative new technology development parts of the economy. And they were really interested to hear about what you all are doing with Uber and Lyft and some of your ride-sharing services. And to the point where they periodically have caucus meetings on various emerging subjects, and they talked about wanting to have somebody from PSTA, Brad, come back and maybe talk to them at some point about how public transit is using ride-sharing to supplement service and expand the service. So I thought, all in all, that the first meeting in March was great. Commissioner Barkley, despite not having a coat, was a trooper to muddle through the snow and the cold to get to all the meetings. He did a really good job. So I think that was a good meeting. And some of the after meetings were canceled, but I think PSTA did a really good job, particularly on the ride-sharing information. Lots of folks had lots of questions about what you all were doing. Unfortunately, about 2 days after Brad and company left is when the president's budget came out. What they call a skinny budget. It's the early version of his budget, not the complete budget. But one of the items of most concern there was he basically, in his early budget, eliminates most of the capital investment grant programs, including the Small Starts program. So basically what he says in his budget, the skinny budget, was small start projects like your BRT project, the federal government would no longer support those unless there was already a project agreement in place. So your project agreement won't be in place until later this year at the earliest. And so you would be one of those projects, along with about 8 others, I think, Brad, from Florida, that would be potentially not eligible for funding going forward. So that's obviously a great concern. FTA actually had a conference call the day the budget came out. We joined in at Brad's request on that conference call. They didn't really have a lot of information, but it was, it's of great concern. And it was a subject we discussed with Commissioner Long and Commissioner Gerard when they were up last week in Washington to talk about the impact of the president's budget request on transit authorities like yours, not just on small starts, but on all the capital programs, whether it's the low-no bus program, the capital improvement projects, all those things would be impacted by the elimination of these funds. So, but just before Brad and the commissioners came up to Washington, we actually hosted a visit out here. Brad hosted a visit with Darden Rice, the chair of the board, with Congressman Chris came out. Spent about, I guess, almost 90 minutes here on the grounds. Got a great update on what you all were doing. It was his first visit, I think, here. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it was his first visit. I think it was made a lot of headway with him, helping him understand the BRT project, helping him understand the impact of the budget request. He's completely engaged, offered to be whatever assistance he could. We saw him again last week when Commissioner Long and Commissioner Gerard were up, and he reiterated that he's on board to do whatever he can to be helpful. So it was a good visit by him out here. And then last week, Commissioner Long, Commissioner Gerard, and Brad were in town for, we had a fairly intensive 2.5 days of visits. I think we saw Congressman Bilirakis, we saw Congresswoman Castor, Congressman Christ, saw Congressman Ross. We met new Congressman Darren Soto, who actually has a home here and residence in St. Petersburg, so he was excited that he knew all about some of your issues here. We saw Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who's from Florida and is the chairman of the Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee. We saw Senators Nelson and Rubio, and as I said, they had a visit with the Senate Banking Committee, which actually oversees transit issues for the Senate. So it was a good set of meetings. It was a good opportunity to talk about the BRT project, the impact that the budget request would have. I think to a person, I think Commissioner Long and Brad would vouch that all the members of Congress pretty much dismissed the president's budget request as being a non-starter, Republican and Democrat members. But that said, as Commissioner Johnson and I were just talking about, that doesn't mean you can't let off. You have to continue to talk about the impact of those budget requests on things like your BRT route. And so we need to continue to do that. Chairman Diaz-Balart actually gave us a homework assignment, and he was pleased to hear that the FPTA that Brad chairs is going to be very active in talking about the budget request and the impact of that budget request, but he also wanted us to ask if the commissioners here would actually reach out and start educating, particularly the new members of the Florida delegation. There are 10 of them in our 27-member House delegation, to talk about the impact of the budget, but also talk about the sequester. Federal sequester is back in play again this year for next year's budget. And he wanted us to make sure members understood if the sequester went into place, that was going to have an impact on his ability as chairman to fund public transit programs going forward. So I think Brad's already working on a letter to help out with that. I think the association is working on a letter to some of our freshman members, maybe to help out in that regard too. And so I think that the visit was very well timed to be there at an important time.
Harry, could I just
Sure.
add to that? It's important to tell everyone else that we also met with Senator Nelson and Rubio,
Right.
as well as Jan D.C.
Yeah, she's with the Senate Banking Committee,
Banking
right?
and
She was talking
Finance,
about and we met with Congresswoman Castor,
Yes,
and she was very pleased to get an update on all that you all are doing with HART to talk about trying to, some of your interagency agreements that you have, your interlocal agreements, and some of the ways that you all are trying to work together to serve the passengers and the transportation needs of the area here. She was very excited to hear about that and asked to be counted on to help there. We also met with Congressman Ross he's a little bit further east over in the Lakeland area, but he too was a Republican, part of the Republican leadership, but expressed great support for public transit programs too. Yeah, so it was good. It was a good set of meetings.
And then we also met with FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers,
Correct.
so that was important.
Right.
So am I honing in on the rest of your remarks?
No, that's good. No, I thought your group did great. And I think Commissioner Long was talking about, we met with Senator Nelson. One of the things that Senator Nelson talked about was his support for transit, that he was going to be joining some of his colleagues in Congress expressing concern about the cuts. And I sent Brad today, I don't know if you have a copy of it yet, but the day after we were there with Senator Nelson, he signed a letter with 32 of his other Senate colleagues opposing the cuts in capital investment grant programs. So there's a letter here that he signed to the Appropriations Committee expressing concern about that cuts. He told us, Commissioner Long, he was going to do that in the meeting. And Senator Rubio also expressed great concern about the transportation cuts and was interested. I think it was the first time he'd really heard about the BRT project, and so I think
So
it
you
was a
actually
good time.
met with him, not
We did.
his staff?
We actually have photos to prove it, yes.
Sat right next to me,
Yes, he
even
did.
remembered the funny stories I told him about.
I would say,
That's a change, because before he was not very available to people.
He was a little busy with other things before.
Yeah, he was very engaged. He was there for he was headed over to chair the Senate. He was going to preside over the Senate,
Yeah.
but he stayed for a good 25
Yeah,
minutes, I
great.
think. And it was
It was a really lovely.
but it was a good,
visit.
I think there were a number of good high-level meetings. So I think, all in all, between the visits in March
Congratulations.
and the visits in April, I think you have covered a lot of ground on the federal side. The
You
timing
see
was
all these
good.
signatures?
Yeah,
on this?
there are 33 on there.
That's impressive.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I can, Steve, are you on? Have you joined in, Steve?
I am.
So Steve
hi,
Palmer is
Steve.
on here too. He joined us for a number of these meetings. Steve was going to give you an update, I think, on where we are with As you know, the fiscal year 17 appropriations process is still underway. The continuing resolution we're operating under now expires on April 28th. So Steve's going to give you an update on where the current status of the appropriations process is, and then where we are with the fiscal year 18 budget and appropriations status. Steve?
Thank you, Harry. And I don't need to take a long time. So, with respect, as Harry said, with respect to FY 2017, that's the fiscal year we're operating in. There is a continuing resolution that will fund the government through April 28th. The Congress at the end of last year decided they wanted to kick the can into this year so that they could have the opportunity to work with President Trump, all House, Senate, and President, therefore being part of the same party. But as they've negotiated through the different appropriations bills, they've reached closure on nearly every issue. There are still a few outstanding issues. And they hope on the week of, when they're gone now for 2 weeks for the Easter recess, and they hope when they come back on April 24th that they'll be able to pass either an omnibus appropriations bill as one option or a continuing resolution that will carry them through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, is the other option. So they're hopeful they can do an omnibus, which would be good because that would mean that the increases that were authorized in the FAST Act would become funded then, and they would then, some additional formula funds would flow to PSTA. But we will not know until they come back that week of April 24th where the leadership has decided that they want to take things. So we're working towards trying to get that resolved over the next this next 2-week break. And then as Terry said, we soon will be in fiscal 2018. The president's skinny budget has been, as they called it, has been sent to the Congress. It calls for $54 billion to be taken out of domestic spending and essentially transferred to a $54 billion increase in defense and homeland security spending. And more specifically for transit, they've proposed to zero out the Capital Investment Grant Program. That is the Federal Transit Administration program where the funding for the Central Avenue BRT would come from. So there is, as Harry alludes to, and Brad is working on, we're working to develop letters and talk to the delegation at length about that this past week in terms of trying to oppose those specific reductions. But there isn't anyone on Capitol Hill that has even begun to speculate about how they will be able to restore funding, whether they'll be able to restore 100% of the funding that has been traditionally funded, or whether they'll have to accept some of the Trump budget cut proposals. It's to be determined, but the good news is I think we're very hopeful on this year's budget, the FY17 budget, that we'll get that wrapped up in the next couple of weeks.
And one of our goals has always been in the 17 budgets to make sure the Small Starts program is fully funded, so that all the projects that are have construction agreements with the FTA are funded, so that there's no backlog by the time fiscal 19 rolls around when your project's ready to go. So that's been. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to ask you, Steve. Do you know if Mary Scott or someone on your team is putting together a summary document that we can use to write thank yous to all the members and everybody we visited with?
Yes, in fact, I think, Harry, that's a document that I saw in draft form. I don't know if you've shared that with the board yet.
Yeah, I think we did a summary of all the meetings, the PSTA meetings, Commissioner.
Oh, is it this one?
This one.
Yeah,
It
one.
says the PSA logo.
Yeah, it's federal activity report. I don't know, if you don't have it, we'll make sure you get it.
No, I got it right
Yeah,
here.
so we have a summary of all the meetings you took there. It's actually a summary of both sets of meetings. And then we're up on your county commission hat. Mary Scott's working on a summary document for all the county commission business that you
That's
and
good.
Commissioner
That
Roy
would be
did too. So
very
we'll
appreciated.
have 2 separate documents for you.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And I'll
Two is better than one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can email this. I put it in the Granicus. It's in there too.
There's a summary. We can help you with the letters or the addresses, and if you do letters, we can hand deliver them to make sure they get to the right places.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
So,
Very good.
yeah, so.
All right, continue on. Are you?
Yeah, I mean, unless somebody has other questions, I mean, again, our priority now is just to continue forward and make sure that we emphasize the need to support the funding in the 18 cycle for what you're doing. You guys did a great start on that, and we'll keep working with Brad and the statewide group, along with APTA and individually as best we can. So
So I would like to report that idea. I think it started with Senator Nelson and then got picked up with Representative Ross and maybe a couple other people, that we put together a group of like-minded business and community leaders to go as a delegation. I have received enormous support for that, Harry, and I was excited to be able to share that with you today.
Oh, good.
And so as I move around and talk to folks, I'll report back to you, but if you could think about it a little bit and give me a time frame for when you think we would be poised to do that,
Okay.
that would be helpful as well.
Okay, we'll give you some target windows there.
Yeah. Yes?
Madam Chairman, I'm wondering if there, in this President's skinny budget, there's any indication of the infrastructure investment, whether there would be any infrastructure investment related to transit?
There, Steve, there was, I don't think any reference in the skinny budget to the infrastructure. Is there, Steve?
No, Harry's right. There is no reference in the budget, nor has there been any real declarative statement out of the White House about what the infrastructure package will look like. So, there's a lot of talk about public-private partnerships. There's a lot of talk about private sector investment and tax credits, but so far nothing specific has come out.
There have been some discussions. I know the Republican conference had a meeting with Secretary of Transportation Chow the other day, and they tossed around some ideas on infrastructure. Some people think that because the healthcare issue's on hold right now and tax reform's not quite ready to go, that they may pivot to do an infrastructure, some type of infrastructure package in the late spring, early summer. I think it's a little too early to tell yet, but there's clearly interest in doing it. There's bipartisan interest in trying to do it. The big question is who's going to pay for, how are you going to pay for it, and how much of it will be funded by the federal government, how much will be in the form of tax credits or other non-direct federal payments. So there's a lot of big issues to be, we'll continue to look at that for you.
Well, thank you very much, Steve and Shannon and Harry. I think I can speak for everyone when I say how much we value your working with us, and we just appreciate your ability to help us do the strategic planning to position us well. And thank you for everything that you did to set up our appointments. I know from personal experience in my own world that is not easy to do, especially when they are working. So thank you.
You all did a great job. I think it was really valuable that you all were there, and Commissioner Gerard did a great job with you, and we all had a hard time staying up with Commissioner Long. She was, we ran into more people that she knew, that she served with. It was a great opportunity to
it was like old home week.
It was.
Fabulous fun. All right, so thank you very much. Now, Ron, are you...
By the way, did you tell Commissioner Justice that Congressman Soto mentioned you in our meeting when he was up there? So
Oh.
because you must have served with him at some point.
Yeah, Darren was,
Yeah.
Darren and I co-sponsored stuff. I was in the
Yeah.
Senate, he was in the House. We were working on a lot of issues together.
He mentioned you when we were.
He's
we
all
were there.
grown up now,
I know.
married and everything. It's amazing.
Commissioner Long?
Yes.
Before we leave the federal issues, well, number one, I want to echo what Harry said, and first thank Harry and Steve and Shannon, just like you did. But yes, as you know, Commissioner Justice, once folks leave our term limited out of the Florida legislature, they either come back to be a county commissioner, or they go and they become a congressperson. And Commissioner Longs knew every single person in Washington, D.C. from Florida. She was a rock star, and she and Commissioner Gerard did a great job with passion and energy, even if it was our 10th meeting of the day. It was really great, so thank you so much.
Wouldn't have expected anything else.
And I would say that, and from a government perspective, they did it very efficiently because they were able to combine PSTA board work along with county commissioner board work. I thought that was an effective use of your time, that you were able to take these meetings and cover a lot of ground for both the county commission and with the PSTA board.
They invited
in
me
the same meetings.
to tag along with them to the meeting with FEMA, and I was taking a photo to appear in a video soon of Commissioner Long and Gerard in front of the FEMA, and I almost got our whole delegation arrested by the lady for taking the photo. She had to look at my phone and approve. She thought the photo was nice, so it was okay. But I put this on the agenda today on your legislative committee as an action item, because as Harry said, at this point, something that across the country people are doing is writing letters. And as you see, the Senate has written a letter signed by all these people, all these senators. It was suggested while we were in DC that we would have the PSTA board write a similar letter. And we haven't done this in the past, but I think it does have an impact, as you see from the Senate letter, if you get individual signatures on it. So I put the PSTA board members' signatures on the letter. And if the committee would think this is a good idea, then you could take an action to approve this and take this to the PSTA board, and then at the meeting at the end of April, we'll have everybody, if approved, sign it. As Harry said, as the chair of the Florida Public Transit Association meeting, we're also, all my transit brethren across the state are working on a similar letter to be signed by representatives from all the 35 different transit systems across the entire state of Florida, and then hopefully get a, very similar to this U.S. Senate letter, a Florida delegation letter signed by hopefully Republican and Democratic members of the House from Florida, from across the whole state. Because as Harry said, it's not just PSTA Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Project that's at risk. There's multiple projects in Orlando, in Jacksonville, in South Florida right now, and then in the future, certainly Hillsborough and other places that are at risk too. So I think there would, and as our meetings, and we met with what, 6 or 7 members of the House delegation, so about a third of the entire delegation. There seemed to be support for this kind of thing. So we're working on that letter from the state, but for your consideration for recommending to the PSTA board to send a letter signed by the PSTA board members, you could take a vote on that.
And then, would you suggest, Harry, that we also do the same kind of letter from the commission, Knowles County Commission?
That would be good. And you'll have other issues on top of the transit issues, but probably, yeah. Now, you have already sent, the county commissions, I think you've already sent some letters, I believe. You delivered some letters expressing some concern, but we could do a...
I did, but as you know...
I think we talked about doing a follow-up letter, yeah.
Yeah.
But if all the commissioners would sign, I think it's good. But what Brad and I talked about, at this letter he's talking about here, you have 15 board members. That's pretty impressive when there's a board that big. A bipartisan board all signs a letter like that. I think that carries a lot of weight with the delegation.
So I would move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, done.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
are you done, Brad?
Yeah.
Ron, are you ready now?
Harry, I will be.
Yes, ma'am. So to give everybody kind of a quick snapshot of kind of where we are in Tallahassee, we'll be getting week 6 of session.
I can do something to assist.
Let me kind of share with everybody from a timeline standpoint, from a budget timeline standpoint. This week, the House and Senate will pass their respective budgets off the floor on Wednesday and Thursday. They will then officially start the conference process next week. To start the conference process, the first thing they need to do is come up with allocations. We're a long ways apart on allocations. I'm sure all of you have been reading. They're almost $4 billion apart on allocations at this point. So allocations will need to be done during week 7. Then once allocations are done, hopefully they get allocations done. They will then start the official budget process during probably toward the end of week 7, the beginning of week 8. Remember, session's done up here on Friday, May the 5th. So there's 2 things in the budget I want to talk specifically with you all about. I'll talk about the first one, Natalie will talk about the second one. The first one is Senator Brandes has put $100,000 in the budget for the bridge over in Clearwater. He's calling it something creative because he wanted to call it creative, some type of a reversible lane for PD&E. We requested $1 million based upon my conversations
and Alan's conversations with him, we feel confident we're going to get close to the $1 million. He was having an allocation standpoint. He wanted to at least put a placeholder in, knowing that the Senate, rather the House, did not have it in the budget, but they did not. Just to show you how far apart they are, the House has less than $100 million in member projects in the budget. The Senate has almost $700 million in member projects in their budget currently. So they're a long ways apart on member projects. And so this will be considered a member project, but based upon, again, my conversations with Senator Brandis, I feel confident that we're going to be able to get at the $1 million mark, or very, very close to the $1 million mark to the PD&E. And then from a transportation disadvantage funding standpoint, when the budget came out, we actually did a side-by-side of not only the funding, but more specifically the proviso, send that to Brad and staff to kind of review and come back with comments. And then on Friday, Natalie had a meeting with the staff director for the Transportation and Economic Development Appropriations Committee of the Senate. And now I'll have you report back on that now.
Sure. So as you know, the proviso will go into the back of the budget, and that will direct how dollars will be allocated for TD. This is as an output of the CDC, report. This is what we were talking about with Steve Holmes, the different options that were being vetted and proposed. Based on Teddy, who is the staff person we met with on Friday, and she's the one that Alan has been talking with extensively up to this point. They are feeling very comfortable. Steve Holmes has met with them, with Senator Brandis. Senator Brandis, who has taken the lead on this, was very comfortable. They will be moving forward with option 1, and that is what's reflected in the proviso language. In part, the comfort level that I was reading off of them is because with proviso, it doesn't put it in the statute. It doesn't make it law. It, in a sense, is a pilot program. So they anticipate being able to have the proviso there. It directs the formulation to be done based on the option 1 allocation, and they then can reassess how those impacts look post implementation, and thus, especially since we're coming into an early session next year, they can evaluate and adjust accordingly. It's considered a glitch. If they have a glitch, they can fix it. Some of the questions and concerns that we had when we did our initial pass and look at it was, kind of our highlights is that the rural system seems to be getting a little bit less money this year. It is, where we have the competing grant program where we're funding the PD late shifts and the Uber program. For us, it's the same amount in year 2 as we had hoped, so that was a positive. The language that was being recommended was option 1. There were some allocation math differences. There's an actual slight increase for us in Pinellas. But we were concerned that, there was a few counties like Miami-Dade, who is a significant player in Tallahassee, obviously, for apparent reasons. They actually were showing a reduction of about $2 million. And Senator Garcia, who is active in the PD realm and actually has a bill filed this year, being that he's from Miami, we were concerned that that would be a concern to him. So that was one of the things that we wanted to talk about with Teddy, was one, where were they at with the proviso? Were they confident that they could move forward with this and get, support? And where was Brandis? She left me with the impression that, that they felt very good about it. They were not concerned that this option was going to do any unintended consequences. But if in fact it did, they had the opportunity to correct that after this first year. And second, they did not believe that any of the counties, including Miami-Dade, per Garcia, would have any concern with the reductions, because those reductions were in alignment or correlated to the dollars that were actually given back in past years. And so this was actually a corrective action, and it was what allowed them to reallocate through the new formula to places like Pinellas. And so it was a win-win. I think everyone was feeling very good. Brandis is bought into this. He is confident with it, and he'll be leading the charge with it. So overall, the meeting was short and sweet, but very, very good, very reassuring, and we're feeling good about how the proviso should move forward.
Excellent.
Any questions on the budget process of kind of where we are, A, from a process standpoint, or B, about a couple of the issues that we care about in the budget?
No, I don't think so. I don't see anybody. Oh, Brad.
Well, if I could just make a few comments about the transportation disadvantage things, and then maybe just have Ron give us the latest update on the T-BARDA legislation.
We're not there yet, that's the last thing.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't want to lose that.
No, we won't, don't worry.
So, just to remind the board, and of course you know that our board member Patty Johnson is very focused on transportation disadvantage, and I've kept her updated on this process. But just as a reminder, again, what Natalie was just describing was last year, thanks to PSTA's efforts, the legislature approved funding for a study of the formula in which and how the transportation disadvantage dollars are allocated to all the different counties in Florida. That study was completed in December, but not made public. I don't think it has been made public yet formally, but we've gotten a copy of it and we've looked at it. There were some concerns because the commission in Tallahassee, that Commission for Transportation Disadvantage, had reduced the study down to giving 3 different options for new formulas to allocate across the whatever number of counties there are. And there were winners and losers in each of the scenarios, option 1, 2, and 3. But they generally reflected what our goals had been to respond to have the formula be more reflective of demand for low-income transportation rather than setting minimums per counties, which mostly favored rural areas. So it did that. The study recommended option number 1, which, as Natalie mentioned, is fairly neutral for PSTA. It's actually a small, I think about $100,000 and some increase for Pinellas County, largely because we have a higher than average senior citizen population, a senior citizen low income population than other counties proportionately. But it was a $2 million hit to Miami-Dade. And for that reason, the Florida Public Transit Association, which represents all the different transit agencies, all the different counties, we had a meeting about this. And of course, there was concern by the folks from Miami-Dade. Broward County also saw a reduction, as did Lee County, Fort Myers area. And so the FPTA board took a position supporting the study and option 1, but asking for a year-long delay in implementation. Took a position asking the legislature to delay implementation by a year so that the issues that Natalie briefly touched on related to what expenses are eligible to be reimbursed by the funds can be worked out or better clarified with the different counties. As Natalie said, 2 years ago, some $6 or $7 million was determined to be ineligible expenses by Miami-Dade and Broward County, and Miami-Dade had to return all that money to the state, which created a little pot of money in Tallahassee that then became the money that our Uber late shift program was funded out of. Miami-Dade doesn't want to keep losing that $6 million, but they argue that the expenses and the way the expenses they have should not have been rejected that were. And so I just want to say for the record that the Florida Public Transit Association's position is to accept the study but ask for a year delay in implementing the formula while these issues related to expense eligibility get worked out, primarily with Miami-Dade, but also I heard that Lee County down in Fort Myers had similar kind of issues. And I don't know if that can be done from an administrative perspective. We're trying to get another meeting of the transit systems with Steve Holmes to try to see what, he's the executive director of the commission, to work out. But in general, I think, yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
And I will just, as a FYI for you, so at the very end of our conversation with Teddy, she did mention that Lisa had asked to come and meet with her, with Steve, and Teddy was made himself available, but that had not happened. And that Lisa had actually come back to her, because Teddy was saying, okay, if you want to meet, let's meet. And Lisa, said, well, let me meet with Steve ahead of time. So I think you might want to check in with Lisa because, Teddy, just made a reference to the fact that there was supposed to be meetings, but meetings never happened. So if there are those concerns, I don't think that they're being thoroughly communicated.
Okay. Well, yeah, so you said you talked with Senator Garcia and he wasn't concerned, then that sounds like maybe they haven't been communicated. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm meeting with Senator Garcia next week, so I briefly had a 2-minute conversation with him in the hall week last week. Mentioned to him not only about his bill, but about making sure he knew about the formula. He knew a little bit about it, so we'll have a little bit more from him next week as well, but we'll report back to the group list.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for working on that issue, which is important to all of us here at PSTA, as you know. Okay, got that covered.
So Ron, would you give Senator Garcia my regards, please? I haven't talked to him in a long time.
Yes, ma'am, I'll be more than happy to for you.
Okay, so are we ready to talk now about T-BARDA?
Yes, ma'am, and that'll be my final thing to chat with you all. So nothing's happened since our last call, a week and a half ago. Nothing's happened in Tallahassee since then. As all of you on the table know, there is a bill that's been filed by Senator Latval and Representative Rollerson from over in Plain City that would basically reorganize T-BARDA. It's really going to do 3 things. It's A, it's going to change the footprint of T-BARDA. B, it's going to change the governance model, change the appointments and how the appointments are made for T-BARDA. And then the last thing it was going to do is, instead of just producing a 5-year plan that is put on a shelf somewhere, is actually have them get more involved in transit-related projects working with DOT. Where we are at this point is that the House bill was supposed to be heard last week in the committee. We were on a committee with, I don't know how many bills, Natalie, like 50 bills or something. It was a long list. We didn't quite make it all the way down to that bill. It's going to be back up, not this week, during week 6. There's a very limited amount of policy committees that are meeting this week. Most of the committees are meeting are only appropriations related. So during not this week, but next week, we'll have the House bill heard in its final committee reference that it would go to the floor. And then we've got Senator Latval's bill would be heard in Senator Lee's committee next week in week 7. Then we'll go to Senator Latval's full appropriations committee during week 8. At that point, it'd be eligible to go to the full floor. Where we are at this point is, if you look at all the amendments that are out there, I think some of the discussions going on behind the scenes between the House and Senate, right now where it lands is, you probably lose Sarasota from the footprint of T-BARDA, and definitely Citrus from the footprint. That'll take you down to 5 counties. There's been discussions about, do you leave Hernando in or not? I'm not sure if they've made that decision. I think that's something that's coming from the Senate side. I'm not sure where the bill sponsors are going to land on that. I will tell you, as of the beginning of week 6, it looks like Hernando would be included, but things could obviously change. They've done some other amendments to make sure that, I think the original bill draft that was floated out there did not have the mayor of Tampa and the mayor of St. Petersburg included. Obviously, as the 2 largest cities in the footprint of T-BARDA, they should be included. They've been added back in the House and Senate bill. There's been discussions about opportunity appointments under the new board that are coming out of Tallahassee. I think they're trying to go back and look at that. They're trying to keep the board, both bill sponsors want to keep the board at a manageable number of around 13 board members. Those 13 would include a county commissioner from each of the 5 counties. And then if you end up with a 5th county, but right now it'd be 5. PSTA and Hartwood both would have seats at the table. You have the mayor of Tampa, the mayor of St. Petersburg would put you at 9. And then they would have like 4, they're considering like business and industry related seats. those four seats would be, originally it was going to be one from the Senate President, one from the Speaker, and then two from the Governor. Now that may change. Now there's some discussions about the House Speaker and the Senate President make appointments, and so I know the bill sponsors are working through that as well. I think there's two final concerns right now that the bill sponsors are trying to, kind of work their way through. Is number one, in the current bill, right now they have the word transportation in the title. Tampa Bay Area Regional Transportation Authority. They want to change that to Transit Authority. Those are folks from back in the Tampa Bay area. Many of you are unable to know who they are. Have concerns about changing the word transportation to transit because they believe this is code for rail. Then the other concerns that's been raised is, if this is not about rail, how can you put if you're going to change T-BARTA, how can you change it in such a way that would require the legislature to be at the table if you are going to move forward with some type of rail projects in the future, which probably, by the way, is not that big of a deal because let's fast forward 6 to 8 years from now, let's say a referendum gets passed and, all of a sudden T-BARTA is in the business of, helping work or operate on a rail project. At some level, the state would have to be involved in that, and there would have to be some type of legislative authority to be able to do that through the budget process, DOT work plan or something. So I think that could ultimately kind of be worked out.
So Ron, if I could just intercede for a minute, maybe you could message what it really needs to reflect, and it needs to really reflect transit. And let the angst about code for rail be handled by the local folks who are here dealing with that on a practically daily basis.
So, and I think that's where we end up, Shannon. I think at the end of the day, that's where we land at. I think we end up transit in there because in transit, by the way, does not have to be rail. It could be BRT, and there's other things that probably would be on the table first before we even get to rail, depending on, if there's a referendum that passes in the future. So I think you end up there, but some of the concerns that you heard locally at, your PSTA board meeting, you probably heard at the county commission meeting, those people are now beating the drum in Tallahassee about this is all code for rail. So
remind them that Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority exists, and they put that in statutes many, many years ago. Same with HART.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
There's precedent in using the word transit. This is 2017. We're not in the horse and buggy days.
So this bill has been in flux. It's changed a lot over the last 2 months, basically. Barry Chevrolet and Jeff Vinnick, who are chairing the Transportation Committee for the Tampa Bay Partnership, they're going to be in Tallahassee, not this week, but next week. Actually, wasn't that the bills should be up. That's just when they were planning to be here. It just happened to work out. They're going to be here during week 7. They're going to be walking around having conversations with a number of folks, making some of the points that not only Commissioner Long just made, but others up here have been making as well, is you can't, whatever the new reorganization of T-BARTA looks like, the reorganization is just the first step, but whatever you do this year, she can tie her hands for future years, for future projects, because we don't know what this project is going to be, what the funding source is going to look like. And funding is going to be the next discussion, by the way. This is just the first step in all of this, is what does funding look like, which is probably attached to some type of a project. Whatever comes out of this premium transit study that DOT is working on, that's probably going to be a potential project that T-BARTA could work with DOT. Not necessarily building, but potentially operating at the end of that.
All right, we're leaving it in your hands.
No pressure.
Get it done, baby.
Yes, ma'am.
Are they all still liking you?
So far so good.
Good.
So, yeah, so far they're understanding the positions that we're making, and they're listening. The most important thing is, particularly San Lav Valley, they're really listening to many of the concerns and potential ideas we've had to make the bill better.
Well, all right then. Very good. Now, what are we doing about this homestead exemption? Switching gears totally. The homestead exemption thing that passed last Thursday, oh my God, that's a $21 million hit to Pinellas County.
Yeah, we know, and obviously the Senate hasn't taken it up yet, but the Senate's moving. I will tell you, the Senate seems to be moving forward with it. So I'm not sure if they made a final determination yet, if they're going to put that out there. Obviously, it's not a part of their tax package because it has to go to the voters for approval, but I will tell you the House is leading the charge on that. I think the Senate's just coming along with it. I'm not sure if the Senate actually passes it at the end of the day or not, but I can tell you there has been a lot of concerns raised in the Senate on the impact it would have on local government.
Yeah.
Seriously. And PSTA and
Yep.
all
Everybody.
of us. I mean, the mushroom effect is almost catastrophic if you think about it. Okay, I'm done.
We could write a letter on that. I don't know.
Well,
What's the impact of 21 million in millage at the county if you had to adjust the millage for that?
it's huge. I mean, do you know the figure for the millage? I don't know the figure for the millage. I haven't been around for almost a week, but I mean, multiply that by the 24 cities and you figure out pretty quickly that it's a
It's
major.
about another 21 million because our.
It was a significant number of homes being taken off the rolls completely.
Mayor Brown told me that in Largo, it takes almost 100% of their properties off the tax rolls. So that's enormous. Yeah.
And this would be on the first 20, it'd be another first $25,000?
It's currently at 50 and they want to raise it to 75.
I thought the
Well, except
second
the schools
20
aren't included in the second one. We need an F&T person.
Yeah.
Commissioner Long, I can send you, what I'll do is I'll send you, I can send you a staff analysis to you and Brad that you take a look at it. Then if you want to share that with the broader committee as well, again, I think the Senate has raised a lot of concerns about it because of the impact it would have on local government. So typically it's, the Senate's the one that tends to tap the brakes on these type of issues. So it is moving, I'm not going to lie to you, it's moving in the Senate, but it hasn't, obviously it's not getting near as far as it has, the House has already passed it, so.
I mean, I know this doesn't sound good, Ron, but considering all the stuff they passed that shoves their responsibility on top of us, I don't know how they think we're going to pay for it when they take all the financing away.
Well, it pushes more burden on the businesses and we're supposed to be pro-business.
Say it louder.
It pushes more of the burden on businesses and we're supposed to be pro-business.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Silence. Okay, I guess we don't need to let you sit there and hear us whine.
So we'll send you the staff analysis, and the other thing we'll do is, when we meet with Senator Garcia later this week, we'll report back to Brad as well on that. And we'll keep you updated on where they land on the funding for transportation miscellaneous.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks everybody.
All right, thank you very much.
And that's a 2018 election issue.
That's when the property tax thing would be on, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So future meeting subjects.
Well, maybe we should put that on there.
At the exact time when certain legislators might be coming home to run for county commission in other counties.
All right.
And in our county.
Uh-huh.
That's why they want it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so, future subject spread, members?
Well, our next meeting is to be determined because I'm not going to be here because I'm going to be unfortunately going solo to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's okay. So we'll come up with a legislative meeting time in May that will be at the very end, won't be over yet, but it'll be at the very end of the legislative session. So we'll certainly.
So maybe we ought to just think of it as a legislative wrap-up.
Well, doesn't the session not end until?
First week in May, right?
Yeah, the first session will end the first week of May.
Okay. So depending on when we get the meeting scheduled, it might be a wrap up, or we might get a final.
Well, Commissioner Justice is thinking it's probably going to be sometime in June.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't shock me if that was the case.
Brad, the president's budget will be out sometime probably May 10th or thereabouts. So I don't know when your meeting will be.
Well, our meeting was going to be May 4th. Is that right?
Third, I think.
3rd.
So maybe,
But that I will be.
Sometime the following week or something.
or the 17th, maybe?
You want me to try for after the 10th, then?
Well, I think if we want to get any.
Yeah, there's not a firm date yet, but that's what they've been talking about, so.
Well, we can. Well, especially we can sort of see how the state budget discussions. I mean, if it does look like they're going to extend and not be done, we could almost just not have a May meeting and then try for. Our meeting is June 7th. Do you think the legislature will be done by June 7th?
Just depends how close they are at the end of May 7th, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's just an
Yeah.
extension or whether it's just everyone go home, cool off, come back kind of thing.
We can try to work toward the second week in May to have a meeting, which May 10th is the Wednesday. But thanks to Commissioner Long, I have an opportunity to speak to a group of the National Association of Counties about the innovative things we're doing at PSTA, the partnerships in Pittsburgh on May 3rd and 4th. And then,
NACO is doing something in Pittsburgh?
well, it's like a transportation group.
Oh, okay. I just didn't see it on the NACO. I didn't see it on the NACO calendar, but cool, that'll be good.
Well, and I looked on the NACO calendar. There is a website that I found.
The national one is in Columbus, but that's not until
Yeah.
July, I think.
Yeah. And then about 20 minutes after Commissioner Long sent me the thing about NACO, I got another email from a group called, the Canadian version of APTA, the Canadian Urban Transportation Association. So having their annual meeting, along with the international group, which is called UITP, which I can't remember what that stands for. It might not even be English. It's a meeting in Montreal, and I'm going to be going to Montreal to give the same presentation about our innovative partnerships. And the bummer about that is that it's on Mother's Day. In Canada, they have a different Mother's Day. Did you know that? Their Mother's Day is in January. So they don't care about our American Mother's Day, but my mom's back in my wife. But
Take her with you.
I asked her if she wanted to go to Montreal for the day. She had something else going on.
Yes.
Maybe a day.
Mr. Johnson.
The appropriation for the operation of the airport express, is that, we didn't talk about that, that's in the department budget or someplace?
I have a note to find out exactly where that stands, but
Okay.
yes, again,
You mentioned it, didn't
What?
Ron mentioned it, didn't he? He said it was,
There's
two different
bus lane. That was the one that I heard.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
talked about
right.
the busway, the capital project to have a busway constructed on the Clearwater Bridge.
oh,
That's what's moving forward. The idea about operational funding for a express bus service to the airport needs to get included in the FDOT budget. And I need to get an update on that. And we were hoping that the legislature would, sign a letter or make phone calls to FDOT encouraging that. That's why I was concerned if you said that the TMA is revising their priorities to take out regional express bus services. That would be a concern, but it didn't sound like.
Well, they were combining those different categories, and
Yeah.
I think right.
All right, so Lisa Wheeler Brown has had to leave, so are we ready to adjourn since we don't have quorum anymore here?
Good point.
Commissioner Justice moves we adjourn, and I say okay.
No, you can't take any action. We don't have a quorum. We have to stay here forever.
I don't think so.
Well,
Okay.
the only other thing that I
Thank you.
would pass on, the TMA group decided they wanted to have a CCC representative on the new T-BARTA board, but since they're just advisory, they couldn't even write a letter.
And that board's probably going to change anyway, so. And just to remind everybody, May 12th is the collaborative lab at Epicenter
Yes.
for transportation solutions, so I'm looking forward to that. All right, thank you.